You know why I really love Nick Hood as a minister? I watched his father do it, and he took over for the church, and he was one of us, but he really turned out to be a great minister. I know it's hard, and that's something that I know that all ministers may not be doing what they're doing because for the right reasons, but I know it's hard. I know he's a beautiful man, and we've been knowing each other for over 50 years. I believe in him. He's inspired me in so many ways to do what I'm doing and try to be the best at it. Make sure you watch Nick Hood's ministries. You'll never be the same.
God is trying to show you something every step of the way. When things seem to be going wrong, that's God's way of opening another door. I am convinced that God has been directing me every step of my life.
On the Word Network.
America used to be considered a godly country. It doesn't seem to be that way to me now. And I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything, but it's so many things they're okaying for the wrong reasons. There's not godly reason. People need to really open up the Bible, the Bible, and look in it, and really get it into their heart. And this, the way Reverend Hood is doing this is a comfortable way. It's not forcing anything on people. It's a comfortable way and a loving way for it to continue to move in that direction.
The way Reverend Hood presents it, you can understand it, and it makes you want to delve into the Bible even more so that you can see more, because it seems like the program goes off too fast. We need the bread of life.
We really do.
These days we need it more than ever, and Reverend Hood's ministry on TV is giving us our bread.
Today I want to talk about Barnabas and Paul. You know, we know the Apostle Paul, probably the greatest evangelist the Christian church has ever benefited from. But not everybody liked Paul in the beginning. If you read back through the book of Acts, chapter 9, that's where we first learn about Paul. And we learned that Paul was a great persecutor of the church. He was actually there for the stoning of the first Christian martyr, Stephen. He held the coats of the people who killed Stephen. But Paul had a conversion experience on the road to Damascus. While on the road to Damascus, Syria, Paul was struck by what appeared to be lightning. Jesus called down to Paul from the sky and said, his Jewish name, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And Paul, then known as Saul, on the ground, he'd been knocked off of a horse. He's blinded, but he hears this voice from heaven, and he said, "Who's that? Who's calling me out?" And the voice said, "It's me, Jesus, who you persecute." And at that point, you know, Paul is blind. And the men who were with him, who were en route to persecute Christians in Damascus, Syria, they gathered Paul together and they took him into Damascus to a street called Straight. And there, at a house on a street called Straight, Paul sought refuge. There was a man who already was a Christian named Ananias. And Ananias was called by God, and God told Ananias, go to a house on a street called Straight, because there's a man there named Paul, and I want you to pray for him. I want you to baptize him, and I want you to instruct him in the faith. And Ananias gets mad at God. You know, he gets cheeky with God, and then he says, "But God, I've heard much about this man, how he's persecuted the followers of you. Why do you want me to go and bless this man? And God tells him, I have a great work for this man. And so reluctantly, Ananias goes to a street called Straight. He blesses Paul. He prays for him. He teaches him about the way of Christ. And then ultimately, he baptizes Paul, and he gives Paul food, and he tells him more about Jesus. And in this conversion experience, Paul becomes the greatest evangelist the church has ever known. And so Paul is doing wonderful in Damascus, Syria, which is about 500 miles north of Jerusalem. But when he requests, an audience with Peter and James and John and Andrew and Thaddeus and all of the 12 disciples, he tells them, I want to be with you because I have had a personal experience with the Lord. The Peter and company don't want anything to do with Paul because they don't trust him. And so Paul is discouraged because he's not accepted by the Christian faith. But lo and behold, a man named Barnabas, who we haven't heard of before in the scripture. Barnabas was a highly respected disciple of Jesus Christ. He was a believer. He wasn't one of the 12 original, but he was highly regarded in the church. The text tells us in Acts chapter 9, verse 27, but Barnabas spoke up for Paul. And what Barnabas did for Peter and James and John and Andrew and Thomas and all the disciples, Barnabas became an advocate for Paul. And the lesson I get from this is that in life, each of us needs an advocate. No matter who you are, no matter how much you've accomplished or how little you've accomplished, everybody needs an advocate. At some point in life, we need somebody to take a chance on us. In some point in each of our lives, we need somebody who will speak up for you and say, like Barnabas, I know this person. I believe in this person. I've seen possibility in this person. I think you ought to give this person a chance. And that's what I want to talk about today, the importance of having an advocate, but also the importance of being an advocate. And for those of you who are looking at this today, you may say, but Reverend, how can you be talking to me? I don't have that much to offer myself. How can I be an advocate for somebody else? But in each of our lives, there comes a time when we need somebody to speak up for us. And in like manner, we need us to speak up. We need ourselves to speak up for somebody. And when you're in that situation, you realize how critical it is just to assure other people that somebody else is okay. In my life, to be honest, I am the beneficiary of so many advocates. I'm the beneficiary of people who looked at me and they saw a possibility in me and then gave me a chance. And the encouragement that I'm giving to you today is I want you to be an advocate for somebody else. I want you to be an advocate for your child. I want you to be an advocate for your grandchild. I want you to be an advocate for your husband. You to be an advocate for your wife. I want you to be an advocate for the little child on your block who doesn't have a mother or a father. I want you to be an advocate for the child who just needs somebody to trust them, to believe in them, to hope in them. And the more we become advocates for people, just like Barnabas was an advocate for Paul, the more and the better society becomes. In my life, I think about times when people have been an advocate for me. And sometimes I found out in retrospect that people have spoken good things on my behalf, and I didn't even know it. And so often in life, we want to think that we have accomplished everything that we have accomplished because we're so smart, we're so good, we're so fast, we're so strong. But the reality is that very often in life, you have two people who are equally matched. And sometimes the scale is tipped simply on the word of a person who looks at you and says, but like Barnabas, I think this person deserves a chance. And so, when I think about the African American in American history, very often, we have African Americans who have achieved, who've succeeded, because somebody took a chance on them. Somebody said, you can make it. My father told me how when he went to Purdue University, he was deformed. My father had a severe case of scoliosis. He was bent over bent over forwards rather, and he couldn't bend all the way up. But he was a good student, and he worked hard. And my father was the beneficiary of a white Christian minister there in West Lafayette, Indiana. And this minister took my father into his home with his wife, and the minister allowed my father to live in his home in West Lafayette, Indiana, which was segregated at that time. We're talking about in the early 1940s. And this man was persecuted. He was run out of town. But in the process of being run out of town, my dad looked at the man and he said, I want to be like you. I have been training to be a doctor, and I hope to be a doctor. But what I've seen in you is something better than being a doctor. I want to be a minister like you. I want to help people. I want to be an advocate for other people. And my father told me the story that the minister said, well, I encourage you to think about going to Yale University. And my father, in his ignorance, said, where's Yale? What's Yale? And the man began to explain to him that Yale was one of the great academic institutions in America, in the world. And my dad said, well, how am I going to go to Yale? I don't have any money. I don't have any great credentials. And the minister said, I will write a letter for you. And not only that, the minister reached out to a medical doctor in West Lafayette, Indiana. And they talked with my father, and this doctor in West Lafayette, Indiana, wrote a letter to Yale University, and he said, this man, Nicholas Hood Sr., is deformed. He has severe scoliosis of the spine. He will never be able to walk straight. And I encourage you to allow him admission on a disability scholarship. And that's how my dad went to Yale. And he graduated in 1949. The doctor and the minister who wrote letters on my father's behalf were advocates for my father. And in life, we all need an advocate. I can't tell you the number of times I've written letters to judges as an advocate for somebody who's committed a crime. And that's not to exonerate a person who has committed a crime, but it's really to say, give this person another chance. And in life, we need other chances. I know we have a number of inmates who are looking at this program right now in Indiana, in Illinois, and in Texas and other places. And I'm an advocate for you. And I want you to be an advocate for somebody else because that's how the world benefits. And so I want you to think about this, how Barnabas was an advocate for Paul. And when I come back, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how you and I can be advocates for somebody else in Jesus Christ. I'll be right back.
There are people all across this globe who now will have the opportunity to know you like I do, because of course you are very forthcoming in telling stories about life, stories that are relatable, and that means something. How wonderful it is, and I just look forward to seeing how this platform, this new platform, will just rise and grow and really be a vessel through which you can be a blessing to folk all over this world, and Lord knows we need it.
God is trying to show you something every step of the way. When things seem to be going wrong, that's God's way of opening another door. I am convinced that God has been directing me every step of my life.
On the Word Network.
Welcome back. Today I'm talking about Barnabas and Paul, and how at a critical stage in the ministry of the Apostle Paul, he needed somebody like Barnabas to speak up for him, to be an advocate for him. And why did Paul need an advocate? Paul needed an advocate because not everybody liked Paul. Matter of fact, as we like to say, his past was not squeaky clean. Paul had been a persecutor of the Christians. And because he was a persecutor of the Christian faith, the people who were in the Christian faith didn't trust him. And it took somebody we've never read about before in the Bible named Barnabas to speak up for Paul. He speaks up to Peter and the early church apostles, the first 12 disciples. He speaks up to them in Jerusalem. And he says, you ought to give this guy a chance. Because he has had a personal visit from Jesus Christ. He has a testimony that is powerful, is true, is real, and I believe he can bring others to Jesus, maybe in a way that you and I cannot bring others to Jesus. And in a sense, you and I are like Paul, in that there's somebody somewhere who knows your past. There's somebody somewhere who knows that there was a time in your life when you did not have it all together, and they were willing to reach out for you, willing to risk their reputation to tell other people that they ought to give you a chance. And Paul is the beneficiary of that kind of advocacy. And the message I've been trying to get across today is that you and I need to look at ourselves as advocates for other people. Who will be the advocate for the poor? Who will be the advocate for the homeless? Who will be the advocate of the dispossessed, the disinherited? Who will be an advocate for the child who does not have a mother or a father? Who will be an advocate for the person who's divorced? Who will be an advocate for the person who is poor, just doesn't have enough money? And very often, the person who will speak up for you, the person who will give you a chance, that is your advocate. And they become, in effect, like Barnabas. In my life, I have benefited from people who simply took a chance on me. And, when I became a minister, my father was the pastor of a great church in Detroit, Michigan, the Plymouth United Church of Christ. And when I was graduating from divinity school, he called me, he asked me, he said, do you have a calling to a church? I said, no. He said, are you looking for a church? I said, no. And he said, well, you're getting ready to graduate from divinity school. Don't you think you ought to be looking for a job? And I said, I guess. But the truth of the matter was I had so much fun in divinity school. I pastored the black church at Yale. I was the choir director for the Yale Gospel Choir. I was having the time of my life. And I wasn't thinking about working anywhere, but it was my father who, one, advocated for the church, in that the church, in his opinion, needed an associate minister. But number two, he advocated for me that the church would give me a chance. And very often in life, sometimes that's all you need. People think you're too young. They think you're not educated enough. They think you haven't attained enough experience in life. But for all of us, where do we get quote unquote experience? How do you become experienced on a job if you've never had a job? And at some point, somebody has to take a chance on you. And that is what happened with the Apostle Paul. Barnabas took a chance on Paul. But it was a well-formed chance because he saw and he heard about what Paul had experienced in Damascus. And Barnabas looked at Paul and he said, this guy can bring a lot to the church. And if you read the Gospels closely, you'll see that in the beginning, it's Barnabas and Paul, because Barnabas is the one who had credibility. A little later, it becomes Paul and Barnabas. And then after that, it becomes Paul, Barnabas, and Silas. And then at some point, they split up. But the point that I'm making is that he was an advocate. And, to me, one of the reasons why I like Jesus Christ and why I have staked my life on Jesus Christ is because Jesus Christ is an advocate to God for you and me. And what I mean by that is he died that you and I might have life everlasting. He died that the sins of your life and the sins of my life won't carry us to the grave. And to be honest, I think most people haven't committed a whole lot of sins. I mean, everybody, including myself, if we're honest with ourselves, we have to admit that there are times when we could have been better, times when we could have been a better advocate for Jesus, we could have been a better advocate for God, could have been stronger in our faith. But Jesus came to earth so that God would not kick us to the curb. Frankly, I think God is such a loving God, it's hard for me to imagine God kicking anybody to the curb. But the whole point of the ministry of Jesus Christ is that there's somebody between you and God, and that somebody is Jesus. Jesus, who's very man, very human, but at the same time, very God. And because Jesus is very human and very God at the same time, it makes it easier for you and me to get close to God, to see God and to understand God in a more real way, because Jesus is our advocate. Jesus Christ is our role model. And in Christ, we have an example of one who suffered in a terrible kind of way, one who suffered at the hands of human beings, but one who transcended that suffering, transcended temptation to be evil, and to visit evil with evil. And because of that, he died so that your sins and my sins might be washed away. Now that's advocacy. That's an advocate, who will stand up for you and say, you can make it. When I was in the 9th grade, I went to a Lutheran school for 1 year in Detroit. And I went there because, my mother told me, she said, you need more help in math. And I think you can get a better education there. And she said, and by the way, guess what? I said, what's that? She said, you can play football there. I went there. The only football I ever played was Little League, and I played defensive end. And I was very happy playing defensive end. But when I walked into the school, the coach, who's now deceased, a guy named Twame, he looked at me he just looked at me. And I don't know if he saw me run. I don't know what he saw in me, but he said, "I'd like you to play quarterback." I said, "Me?" He said, "Are you willing to try?" He said, "Have you ever played quarterback?" I said, "No." He said, "Would you like to try?" I said, "Sure, I'll try it." And he became my advocate. And the point, and I got a chance to play. And the point that I'm making is, in each of our lives, we need somebody to go out on a limb for us. So my friends, it's time for me to wrap this show up. But I want to thank you so much for watching. I have been sending out letters to people who've made contributions to this ministry. I'm a little behind, but I've been sending out letters and books of my copies of my book of prayers, The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out. And I look at that and I say, the people who support this ministry are really advocates. And I want you to think of yourself as an advocate because I am looking at myself as an advocate. I am an advocate for you. I'm an advocate for the whole world. And I'm just trying to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. And so I want to thank you for watching. I hope you'll tell your friends about this program. If you have room in your heart and your ability, I hope you will support this ministry financially. But I want you to know more than anything else, I am very, very appreciative of you for even taking the time today to watch this program. And I want you to know that I am praying for you, that God will give you the best, that God will give you more than you've asked for, that no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and that God will order your steps wherever you go, whomever you meet, whatever you do. God bless, God keep you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
We hope you've been blessed in a powerful way. Just knowing you took the time to watch today's broadcast is a great encouragement to Pastor Nick Hood. If this broadcast has been a blessing to you, we ask that you mail a tax-free donation to Nicholas Hood Ministries at 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.
God is trying to show you something every step of the way. When things seem to be going wrong, that's God's way of opening another door. I am convinced that God has been directing me every step of my life.
On the Word Network. Welcome